new #1 bestseller, Bootstraps and Bra Straps. It contains the Boots formula to move from rock bottom back into action in any situation, especially right now. If life has knocked you down, pick yourself up with Bootstraps and Bra Straps. Get your copy at www.sheilamac.com today.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's
Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today we have special guest, Jerry ZEHR. Before Jerry went into the ministry, he was a professional actor performing in over 50 musicals and dramas. His novel, Blurring the Lines, tells of his experience in the entertainment business in Los Angeles, California. The theme running through the book is, what are you willing to sell your soul for? Jerry has a degree in speech and theater from Ball State University, and he's been in Indiana and has a Master of Divinity degree from Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis, Indiana. All right, welcome to this show, Jerry.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's good to be with you, Sheila, and all of your listeners.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear more about everything. And, through life, as we go through life, we have ups and downs. And this show actually came about with my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. And it's just a fun book, but it talks about all the tough situations that show up in life and how to get back on track quickly. And so I'd love for you to share with the audience a time in your business or personal life where you experienced a tough situation and how you got back on track.
Well, I think it was when I was in the entertainment business, when I was out in LA, and I was getting a lot of accolades, a lot of affirmation, exterior from the people, but internally I was feeling very empty inside.
Mm-hmm.
I found it was very superficial. All the relationships were transactional, and what can you do for me? And but there really wasn't much feeding my soul. And actually, I'd be doing a show 8:00 at night, get done at 10:00, go out and party, and you drink all night long, or do drugs or whatever. And I found myself feeling very empty inside. And that's when I decided I had to get out of this environment or I'd be dead in 5 years.
Right.
And that's really when I began my spiritual awakening and started seeking something deeper for my life.
Mm-hmm. So how did that change as far as you were in this entertainment industry doing musicals?
Yeah, and I was in the LA Connection, improvisational theater, dinner theater, all of that lifestyle where you're on the road traveling. Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting. And then you took your ministry degree. You got a degree in ministry at that point, or?
Well, I as I got out of theater, I started teaching speech and theater in a high school, but that's when I began understanding, exploring what my understanding was of God. I grew up in a very legalistic Mennonite Amish background.
Oh, wow.
And so my understanding of God was very kind of judgmental. I saw God as this being out there and somehow going to judge us and strike us down. And I didn't see a lot of loving grace. So and I, like many people, if you have a bad experience in religion, you think all religion or all churches or all faith traditions are like yours. So I left God, I disconnected. And that's, when I got out of theater, I started realizing I wanted something more deeper in my life. And that's when I opened myself up again, to start questioning and searching about my understanding of God and people. And that's when I went to seminary, not so much to be a minister, but just to have a credible understanding of God, so that now, I see God as much more. We can call God higher power, love. Some people call it the Great Spirit, as the Native Americans, the higher consciousness. But it is that which is the source of all life, that is within us and around us. And so I began that whole process of learning about faith traditions and religions, and found out that we have so much more in common than what divide us.
Oh, yes, that's so true. And it's an interesting thing. It seems that in life, there's a point in your life, in most people's life, where they get to really reevaluate or evaluate their spirituality, their religious beliefs, or it just changes. And it's a beautiful time to do the studies and the research. And it may be for one reason or another. Maybe you move to a new town and you've got to pick a new church or temple, synagogue, wherever you go. Or maybe you've never gone and you're like, well, let me see what this is all about. And it's an interesting time right now, because throughout the United States, even many of these places are closed. And so that makes it harder to connect with groups and kind of see what they're about, or so that's a little difficult. How have you experienced that switch with the pandemic going on and so many churches having to be closed?
Well, I mean, I think it is for all of us that we yearn for community. We love that relationships, and when we're isolated, it's difficult, it's challenging. The wonderful thing is, what's happened from the pandemic is we've developed this technology. You and I are connecting. I've been with people all around the world, and in some way we're connecting and realizing we're a much more connected as a world community than what we thought we were. But I do think that, part of our journey, as in your book, you have a crisis, you have something that happens in your life where you have to start rethinking. And maybe is it a crisis, but you just start thinking, I want more in my life. And the teachings that you had when you grew up were teachings. It's not
Right.
that they were the gospel, and you can let them go. And there's some value of questioning and searching and seeking. And so that's why I wrote this book, The Peacemaker's Path, multi-faith reflection to deepen your spirituality, because that was my focus, was to say, let us find the themes that are in all of our major religions, that are the teachings that are there, that have been there from thousands of years in different cultures, different times, but God has made present to us, whether it was through Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Baha'u'llah, and that we can see the real essence of the universal laws that God has given to us.
Yes, and there's so much wisdom in those texts, in those writings, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or any other text. There's wisdom from all these years and from the study of spirituality that applies. But then there's people that may have messed it up. And that's, being human. And so there's that wisdom in there. And I'm like, okay, there's certain things that I've done in my life that I was like, well, if all these different religious believers in the different books, they all believe this is not a good thing to do. It's not healthy. It's not whatever. And then science comes along and says, yep, this isn't so good for you. I'm like, okay, question if religion and science are agreeing on this. I'm just not going to do it. I don't need to have that in my life. And so I made decisions based on that. And so now there are these connections where even science has become more spiritual, has shown there's a group of people that will meditate, pray, and they'll send a blessing or a thought or whatever over to something on the other side of the planet. And the water will change or whatever, and they're able to study the difference and the effect. Or you have Dalai Lama comes to town, or another religious person, and you'll see that the crime goes down. And so there's something to that, that's, even if you're not spiritual or religious,
Right.
that's like,
Well,
there's something there.
Well, and I think as you say, I mean, quantum physics now understands in science that there's different dimensions of the universe, that energy cannot be destroyed, but it gets manifested in different ways. So, like, one of the things, I have these 6 themes that I've written in my book, and the idea, like, one of them is about the karma. Jesus speaks about it as you reap what you sow.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that what you put out there, you will come back. If you put out there goodness and love and joy, it comes back to you.
Right.
If you put out there bitterness and anger and resentment, that comes back to you, and you have a lot of drama in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so the teachings of Jesus were also, that was the teachings of the Hindu scriptures and Buddhist scriptures thousands of years before Jesus was there. And the whole idea is, by seeing these scriptures that have these central themes, they're not all exactly like, but they're similar in the teachings. You say, wow, we realize these universal truths, as you said, are there. And now even science is proving that. Science is finding out what we know as people of faith have believed.
Yes. And there's so many different things that I've seen in my life that are unquestionable. I've seen people that have passed, that are passing over, crossing over, that they're already speaking to something beyond. And it doesn't matter the culture, all over the world, these experiences happen where there's a connection to something beyond. And so, it's just a beautiful, sacred thing. And that tradition, having some form of tradition in your family, when you do lose a loved one or something happens, that's like, I could see such value in that, because it's part of the healing process. It's part of how you get together in community, how everything is created, so that there's a time for that spirituality that's really part of the healing process for many people, and very helpful.
Yes, and I think, what I realized was, because I had a bad experience early on and I gave up on God, but now I realize, just because you have an experience in a certain church or denomination or faith tradition, that's only, don't blame God for that experience, or open yourself up that God is much broader than what that experience was. And so, I have a new concept of God. I have a new understanding of God's grace and love, to see God present within me and around me and in all things. And that sense of presence of God is, which is part of what I try to help people find, so that in my writing, it's not a book of theology, but it's a practical 40-day devotion, if you will, that people can take and read one reflection a day. And it's something that you can read, and then read these scriptures from different faith traditions, having some questions to reflect on, a prayer from a faith leader. And then you go, okay, I see how these things can broaden and deepen my own spirituality. Not saying that I have to become Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist if I'm Christian, or if I'm some other faith tradition, but this enhance my faith, enhance my concept of God and the world.
Yes. That's wonderful and very good. And something so important is I raised 6 children, 3 from birth, 3 that were adopted very young, under 3 years old into the family. And I always liked to share about the different traditions, especially because we had this blended family of children from different places, and to really honor that, and to give them that choice when they're older, but to give them also the understanding of each human, because each human being, we come here and we come through a culture, and religion is very deep in many cultures in one form or another. And to understand the religion and to study that part of it is to really be able to connect more with everybody.
And I think, your listeners, because they listen to your podcast, which I've listened to, and you have this wonderful view of seeing the world in a more open way of opening yourself up. And so your listeners are already open. They're already asking questions, seeking. And I think, towards bringing some unity and healing to our world is when we're able to do that, when we're able to listen to one another and hear a different point of view. It's very challenging to hold your own beliefs, but to be open to new ideas, and to
Yes.
say, okay, I can let go of this one point of view and accept a new point of view. For some people, they don't like change. They want people to tell them, just tell me what to think, tell me what to believe.
Mhm.
But in reality, for us to really grow, to really deepen ourself and our experience of life, it is for us to ask questions and just be seekers. And
Yes.
that's one of the wonderful things I love about you, and I think your listeners, that they want to learn and be open to new points of view.
Right. Now, I dedicated an entire chapter in my book to spirituality and self-care, and it's something that's so important to give yourself that time, and to figure out what that is for you. It could just be a walk in nature. It could be going to a community service or event, whatever it is for you. But that time is so healing, and it doesn't make any sense for those people that are running a business or working long hours or have a whole bunch of kids to raise, or really busy. But that time fuels you. The time for meditation, for thought, for prayer, it fuels you, and it fuels the family, or your employees. Maybe you work for somebody else. They're going to feel that. So think about the energy when you walk into a room, or somebody else walks into a room. If the energy's off because they haven't fueled, you could lose business deals. The energy's off. Everybody feels it. And it's when they're coming in with that refreshed, renewed energy, everybody feels that there's a peace, whether, especially now, parents, teachers, if you're an employer, even if you just started at the company and you have the lowest position, your energy can completely shift the environment that you're in.
And it's amazing because our thoughts manifest into our actions, and manifest into our bodies.
Mhm.
Dr. Bruce Lipton wrote a book called The Biology of Belief that was really instrumental to me about understanding that our thoughts are they get manifested in many ways. And sometimes we have what I call the critic. We have that voice inside of us that tells us, oh, you can't do that. What do you think you're doing? You're messing up. You're this and that. And that critic voice is usually from a parent or something in our past. But we listen to that voice a lot of times more than we do a good friend or somebody who we value. And I tell people, don't let that critic voice stay in your brain rent free.
Mhm.
All that, those are all our thoughts. You can retrain and reshape your thoughts to manifest and to find that sense of love and self-worth of yourself. But sometimes those of us who grew up and didn't feel very lovable,
Mhm.
didn't had a sense of shame or inadequacy, those were the thoughts that permeate our brain. And we need to first, before we can do anything else with anybody else, we need to learn how to love ourselves and be able to retrain our own mind to give us thoughts of affirmation and value.
Definitely. And there's something else when you have a traumatic experience. Something happens, auto crash or a loss or whatever it is, you're getting a divorce. There's always that protection, and the brain will naturally start repeating that bad incident so that you don't get it again, but it keeps you sick to keep
Yes.
it in. And so it's whenever that thought comes to you, even from the first day of whatever that experience was that was really difficult to get through, to say, okay, yes, that happened, but now let me put a different thought in there. Let
Right.
me redirect that thought. And it's
Right.
so intentional. You have to be very intentional about it, especially when it's a very serious traumatic thing, because it's a natural. I've met people that 30 years ago they got divorced, and they'll come visit, and it's been 30 years, and the first sentence is, this terrible thing happened. And it's like 30 years ago. And so
Yeah.
it's not, so they keep telling the story. So every time you replay the story, unless it's for helping and you're not emotionally attached,
Right.
when you're not emotionally attached, it's different, but they're still in that emotion. They've never left. So really that situation, now it's like they're still there. They're reliving that thing, whatever happened, over and over again, and the body feels it. And then our body has dis-ease. And so
Oh,
that's huge.
and so one of my themes in the book is loving yourself. I
Mm,
have walking the enlightened path, the power of prayer, loving yourself, loving others, the quest for peace. But in the loving yourself, what I realized was growing up in the Christian tradition, I focused on loving others more than I did loving myself. But
mm,
Jesus, the greatest commandment was to love God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And
mhm,
so the second commandment is to love ourselves. Well, that's been something for a lot of us that is difficult. We
mhm.
we think almost if we love ourselves, we're being selfish. When in reality, if we don't self-care, if we don't learn how to love ourselves, we have nothing to give.
Right.
And that loving ourselves, it's some layers of, as you said, about getting in touch with the divine within,
Mhm.
learning to love ourselves like God loves us, believe in ourselves, learning to trust ourselves. And some of that is shaping those thoughts
Right.
that have been with us from many years in the past,
Mhm.
but realizing all they are thoughts. I mean, they're not like any more valuable than what we will produce, but we let them in there because they've been with us for a long time.
Yes, yes, that is a big one. So I'd love to hear more about some of the other chapters in your book.
Well, in part of the first one, of course, walking the enlightenment path is really that beginning of the awareness, a beginning of our own journey of, as you said, something that defines you, that gives you a new journey, and loving yourself, loving others. There's a lot in there about forgiveness and learning to forgive others and forgive ourselves. Forgiveness is one of the most, I think, basic spiritual principles and the hardest thing. When
Mm,
you've been wounded or you've been wronged, it's hard to forgive sometimes somebody. And what has happened is you carry that hurt and that anger or that woundedness, and the other person has gone on and they live their life, and you're still holding on to those grudges.
yeah.
And until we can learn how to forgive others or even forgive ourselves, maybe we've gone through a divorce and we blame ourselves, or we feel like we're not a good parent, or we're not doing something well. And so when we can, the living to learn how to forgive is so instrumental, I think, in our spiritual growth and inner happiness for our life.
Yes, yes. Now, one of the questions that I have to ask is, what was it like singing on the Johnny Carson show, and how did that show up?
Well, and of course, that dates me a little bit. It's kind of like for those maybe who are younger, it's like the Jimmy Kimmel show, or the Colbert show, the Johnny Carson show. I was in the entertainment business out there. I was in the line going into the show with my girlfriend, and they audition you. They have called Stump the Band,
Mm,
where people sing a song, and if Doc Severs and the band doesn't know it, then you sing the song. Well,
yeah.
they actually audition you. Well, I had a vaudeville song,
Mhm.
and so the talent scout, he loved it, and he put me right in a certain spot so that when Johnny Carson comes into the audience, they go, "Who has a song to sing?" To stump
Mhm.
the band, and it looks like he's just picking you out of the random, but he knew exactly where he was going.
Right.
And I sang the song Egyptian Ella, an old vaudeville song, and Doc Severson, they didn't know it. And so as I'm singing the song and I'm going on, Johnny starts to pull the microphone from me because
Mhm.
I'm going on the song, and I pull it back from me because I'm getting close to my ending, and I do the great big ending, and it was fun, and I was so naive because I thought, oh, I'm singing on the Johnny Carson show. Some agent will call me tomorrow.
Right.
When
Right.
when in
Yeah.
reality, nobody called me.
Oh, and it's so interesting because when you go back to talking about that time in your life in the entertainment business, and you go out to parties and networking and trying to meet people, the right people, and it is very different, and interesting. And what advice would you give to people going through that, where they can stay strong in whatever their values and choices are, and not and still do whatever their, if that's their talent and they want to be in that industry or whatever industry, to be able to do that in a way that they can have peace in their life?
Well, yeah, and I think that's really something that I was always confronted with. What are you willing to sell your soul for? Because I was always had these opportunities to do things, but it was going to take a piece of my soul away.
Yes.
Um, and I think other people, maybe they're in sales, maybe they're in a job where their manager wants them to do some things that are unethical. And finally, I just came to the place where it wasn't worth the money. It wasn't worth that those things are temporal. And
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be at a place where I could sleep at night and
Exactly.
feel good about myself.
Mm.
And once I got out of that environment, and I found myself doing something that was feeding my soul, I felt myself being nurtured again, and where I had friends who were the sales, and they were always trying to you know out manipulate the
Yeah.
stores and manipulate things to
Mhm.
get a better market, but they felt like this isn't really what life is about.
Yeah.
And I tell people, find something that you have some passion, that gives you some fulfillment in your life.
Mm.
It isn't just about making money.
Right.
Bob Buford has a book called Moving from Success to Significance. He made a lot of money in his life, but his life was very empty. And he shifted and he started living a life of how he could make significance with his life.
Yes, yes, that's so important. And I guess I was really blessed in my life to have incredible friends, even in Beverly Hills, Hollywood, in the industry, that were actually very aligned, with me in that sense. And I appreciated that. I never really drank or did any partying, but but I went out with them, and they do whatever, some people did their thing, and that was okay. But I always kept really solid with where I was at and why. I mean, I'm like, I'm raising 6 kids. I'm not gonna do these things. It doesn't align for me. Not a judgment, but it just wasn't where I was at. And I was very strong on that. But there were also times, even in my younger years, where I worked for somebody that actually was not very nice to the women, and starting to harass in not appropriate ways. And I literally quit but I had the confidence to say, I know I actually got another job and then I quit. So, I didn't just like, okay, now I'm not going to be able to pay my bills, but I stood for those standards, and it's really hard to do. There was a lot of pressure. That guy actually got fired and caught, anyway, right after that. So I was really glad, because he was hurting a lot of people. But there's something about being in alignment with your standards and saying, this is where I'm at. And if something isn't aligned, no matter, it could be in an industry you love, but working for a company or a business or whatever that isn't aligned with your values is going to hurt. And it's not going to be something that's sustainable for long term. And so it's better to cut that off short and go do your own thing. And I think my belief, this is just my crazy belief, and what I found is staying on that and being really solid about what I'll accept in my life meant that better opportunities would show up. And it'd be like, okay, yeah, no wonder that wasn't right, because something even better showed up for me. And it was almost like a test. Like, are you going to do this? Or are you
Well,
going to,
yeah, and I think I love that image of being aligned, because there is something when we are aligned with the divine, with that which is greater than us, whether you call God higher power, consciousness, great spirit, there's something beyond us that is wanting for us to live in the fullness of who we are. And that's why I wrote this book, The Peacemaker's Path, because it was for people to reconnect with the divine within them and beyond them. So that when you can get connected and align with yourself, and then who are the people who surround you, and I think that's exactly right. So that you can be in any type of industry, and that people can be doing their thing, and you don't have to make judgments on them. But you can say, that's not for me.
yes.
And I want something better. I want my life to flourish.
Mhm.
And so, this was not a book of theology. It was a book of very practical. It's a 40-day devotional, really, a 40-day reflections that you could take each day and read this reflection on this theme, to feed your soul and to
Mhm.
give you some focus. And that was my hope. That's why I wrote this book, and to give some sense of helping people reconnect with the divine within them and beyond them.
Yes. Now, there's this whole thing of religion versus spirituality. Where are you at with that? What is the definition for you?
Well, I mean, and so for me, because I'm in a Christian tradition, I would say I'm religious and spiritual, because I don't define myself out of my religious tradition. I see God in much bigger ways. I have friends who are spiritual, who are not religious, so they'll say, I don't buy into any certain faith tradition. I'm not Christian or Jewish. But I believe that there's something beyond, and I take something from each of our faith traditions,
Right.
and I think that's why I've been involved with interfaith ministries for so many years, and
Mhm.
have found value in the teachings of Buddha and the teachings of Hinduism and the teaching of Jesus. I found, wow, these universal truths that have been present in a different culture, in a different, thousands of years from one another, reinforced to me that there is a consciousness, there
Mhm.
is a power beyond us who's helping us understand that when we are connected with that divine,
Yeah.
we have such greater power in our life.
Mhm. Definitely. Definitely. There's something to it that I've always been very connected or guided or intuitive, in the sense that, okay, if this doesn't feel right, I listen. And then there were times when I was younger where I didn't listen. Obviously, we all did. And you don't listen, and then you're like, oh, okay, that happened. And it was because I didn't listen to that loving, like, no, don't go to that party tonight. Don't go, it's not a good idea. Even if I'm not going to do drinking, it may not be safe for some other reason. Sometimes it's not something we understand, but it's something we can even feel within us. That's a guiding kind of a thing.
Well, and I think for some of us who grow up with maybe some brokenness or woundedness, that clouds our clarity, that clouds us, because we're still feeling a sense of anger or our woundedness in our life. And that's why I say we need to look at learning how to love and give grace to ourselves and forgiveness, learning how to trust ourselves. Because when you can trust who you are and that voice within you, now you can live out a fuller life. I grew up not being told not to trust myself, and I thought, I had to listen to somebody else. And then when I realized, really, God and that within me was the greatest wisdom. Don't listen to other people who were telling me, "Oh, you're lazy. You don't know what you know. Listen to me." And then, I started listening to that within myself. I found a greater confidence and a greater inner peace.
Nice. Yes. And that's something in all my studies, and I did a lot of studies on all the different religions also, kind of like I had that time in my life where I really studied things. And I remember studying the works of Rudolf Steiner and his belief of, okay, all the children are born into the families that they choose, and that there's a reason for that particular religion that they are in. Whether they leave that religion later or not, there was something there that was part of the bigger plan. And I was like, wow, that was different. I really thought, okay, well, I told my kids, well, I guess you all planned me and this religion. So that's what you chose. And then you make your own mind. But it is something, when we get to look back at our families and parents and see how they did things, it really, a lot of times they come from their highest sense of good and right. It's just doesn't align for your life.
Right. And I think our parents did the best they could. That's part of our forgiveness, is realizing my father gave me a lot of good things. He had a terrible temper. He was very driven. And that was the one thing that he passed on to me. And so I had to learn how to deal with my own emotions and my own sense of drivenness, learning how to be present.
Yes.
And so I had to learn to say, just because my father felt like he always couldn't rest and he was lazy if he took a nap. And then he told me I was lazy, because I didn't work hard enough. And I realized that was his own stuff. And I finally came to a place in my life when I go, I'm not lazy. In fact, I do a lot of things. Maybe I don't, am not driven like he was. But of course, he had a nervous breakdown when he was 52 years old.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be like that. So that was part of, I think, having that opportunity of self-awareness and self-reflection. And that's a lot of people, they don't want to do that. They just want to tell me what to believe, or I don't want to change.
Yeah.
And my hunch is people who are listening here are people who are seekers, that they're wanting to expand and listen. And so part of that is asking some of those questions. What hold us back? What do we feel burdened by? And start to think about what were some of those things that we still hold on to that maybe make us feel guilty or a sense of shame, that really are not, they're just there because somebody told us that.
Yes.
But when we really look, and that's why most of us have never read the Quran or the Sikh scriptures or Baha'i scriptures. And so I wanted to bring these scriptures to people so that as they read those with these different themes, they go, wow, Mohammed's teachings and Buddha's teachings are so similar with Jesus' teachings.
Yeah.
And there is some universal truth here that I can gain in my life.
That's beautiful. Yes. And so, so important. What a great, great book. I can't wait to read it. I have not read it yet, so I will be getting that book. And that sounds wonderful. Now, um, I am thinking about what came to me while you were talking is the thing about that time in our lives where you have your children and then they're young adults and they have that time where they're going to make their own choices. And what maybe we believe everything, freedom, and then they become very, very religious in one thing or another. That's they love these rules and they're going to follow one thing or another, or they're going to go a different way, whatever way it is. What do you advise for parents in order to stay in connection and community with those adult children as they kind of figure it out and make their own choices?
Wow, I think that's a great question. And I, for me, relationships are the most important thing. Beliefs, our doctrine, our political points of views are secondary. It's the same way within my family. We have people who are different points of view politically, and it puts some strain on us. But I continue to say what's most important is the relationship. What do we have in common? And to focus on that rather than what divides us.
Right.
And when we started focusing on the things that divide us, I just wouldn't go there. And I would say to people, that your children and your friends have different points of view, that we come with some humility to say, I don't have all the answers. My point of view, maybe this is what I believe, but there's more than one point of view here.
Yes.
And I think when we can come to that humility to say, I don't have all the answers. None of us have all the point of view, that we can learn from each other. And maybe as we can learn and listen to one another, actually, we can have a greater understanding of humanity,
Right.
and of the world and of God.
That's so true. And there's something really special about that community. And I believe right now, especially in our time where people are divided over so many things with the pandemic, and we don't even need to go into all that, but that would take another whole show.
Right.
And then there's the politics, and then there's the religion, and everything is dividing us at a time on the planet where in community, when we come together, that's where we're going to have freedom and find whatever we need to find to end this whole pandemic and have that peace. It's in that community. And so that's really important to look beyond that and look at the love coming from people with different opinions. That whatever they believe it so strongly. They reach out to me and they tell me, quick, you got to do this because of da 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 da, or you got to, or politically da da da. And I'm like, oh, they love me and they want me to know because they want to protect me. They want to care for me. They believe it, and I don't believe it, but or it doesn't align with me. But I only am going to accept the love, and I'm going to send the love back. And I might not watch the video or whatever, or do whatever, but I will acknowledge the love part.
And I think that's so essential. I mean, I think when people say, how do we bring unity and healing in our country, and how do we be a peacemaker? It really begins with our sense of listening and valuing the other. I've been married for 37 years, and I must admit, unfortunately, when we first got married, my wife had 2 daughters. It was a blended family, and I was going to make them straighten up. I came from this authoritarian, my point of view was right, and if you just listen to me, it will all be there. And at one point, I married my wife because she was strong and independent, but at another way, I wanted her to agree with me. And she pushed back, and she helped me realize, Jerry, there's more than one point of view here.
Yeah.
And in fact, what I realized was there's more than one way to resolve an issue, to find ways of resolving. If you really want to resolve an issue, you can find compromise. And I had to learn how to let go of my own point of view. I love to debate. I love to argue. But what I realized was, trying to make my point of view win really lost, I maybe won the battle, but I lost the war because I lost the relationship. And what was more important than being right was caring for the relationship. And I learned that in marriage. And I think that's also in all of our relationships, because none of us have all the truth, as we said. And so let me realize there are more than one point of view, and let me respect people. I can still have my point of view, and I still hold on to my belief, but rather than finding what we disagree with, and I could always do that. I can tell you what I think is wrong in the Catholic faith or the Baptist faith, or what's wrong with the Republicans, the Democrats. Let us find what we have together in common, and then focus on that and build a way of hope and healing for our world.
Yes, definitely. Now, I always ask this question on my show. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I wish we could, of course. And that's part of our growing older and realizing that I wish I would have given myself a little more grace, a little more slowing things down. I was so driven to get through college, to go into LA, to go to the next show, the next production. When one thing is done, I moved on to another, and I didn't really savor. I didn't really, when people gave me a compliment, I said, oh yeah, but not really. And I didn't take those in. And so I realize now, to receive with grace and gratitude the things I've been given, and to enjoy life. So, it's taken me some time, unfortunately, but I hope those who are listening will maybe realize to slow things down, to enjoy the moment where they are, and to give themselves some grace, to realize you're doing the best you can. And when you mess up, it's part of the learning process, and give yourself some forgiveness and love.
Yes, that's perfect. I love that. And again, we are coming to the end of our talking time. So I'd love for you to share the title of your book and where people can get it and learn more about all you're doing.
Well, the book is The Peacemaker's Path, Multi-Faith Reflections to Deepen Your Spirituality. And my website is jerryzehr.com, or you can get it on Amazon. But I'd love to, if you go onto my website, you can connect with me, and if you have comments or questions. But I hope, for those who are listening, who are maybe searching and maybe feeling there's some brokenness in their life, and they're wanting to feel some sense of hope as they're listening to this conversation, I want them to know they are a child of God. They are loved and valued. And even though maybe they don't feel adequate, or they don't feel very good about themselves, hear that divine voice within them, trust themselves, know their love, and live in that goodness to the fulfillment of their desires.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you for being a guest on the show. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mac show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. And today I have something special to share with you. Are you ready to take your power back, take your life back? Have you just experienced a difficult situation or just living through our very interesting times? Are you ready to reinvent, rebuild, and reboot life on your terms? Check out my new book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. Here's a little bit more.
Necessitated. You need a guide to show you how we get through a situation like this, to give you resources and to help you get out of the emotional pea soup fog of dealing with a crisis and the resulting fallout. I've been there, and I'm here to help you. Out of the fog. If you weren't emotionally bound up in your situation, you would have more clarity. You would be able to see your best options for dealing with whatever comes up. If the version of yourself who has already walked through this rock bottom and come out the other end could go back in time and give you, the you right now, some advice, what would she say? Would she tell you to slow down, to stop rushing, that you don't have to have all the answers today? Would the future you recommend not making any major decisions without reviewing them first, particularly while you're still in the fog? Would she tell you that normal is going to look different for a while, but that you will feel normal again? In case we haven't invented time travel by the time you read this book, I'm here to tell you all of the above. I developed the Boots formula to help you learn to make choices, have a life shift, and make great things happen based on your individual values and best life vision. A change is going to happen, and it's worth it. There's a stage where it feels like everyone in your life is picking at you. Life itself may seem like it's trying its best to stop you from doing whatever you want to do. All you hear is, "That's a stupid idea," and "That's never going to work," and "Who do you think you are?" One of the hardest things for people to do is to realign and possibly walk away from anything and anyone that conflicts with their value systems. But you are going to discover that power within yourself. Through the activities and examples in this book, you will discover your true north and will be able to easily do what is needed to move forward with your life. Anything that hurts you, that doesn't resonate for you, that fights against what you want and believe in, you are going to give it the boot. Once you have turned your rock bottom moment into a positive, beautiful life shift, you can live your life on your terms. Your life will probably look different, but you get to design it this time. You are taking your life back, and you are in charge, not anybody else. Sooner than you can imagine, you'll be in the career of your dreams or the relationship you always wanted. Because you are going to learn to develop healthy boundaries. Because you are going to do things differently along the way from here to there. You will begin to attract the people, the job, the place to live, all of the opportunities that align with who you are, your essence, your truth, not anybody else's or even society's expectations of the way you're supposed to be. Once you have accepted that you are in charge of living your life and you begin to embody living your truth, people are going to see you. They're going to be inspired by you. Then you're going to hear, "Hey, can you show me how you did that? I want to do it too." When you assess your peer group and up-level according to your life purpose and vision, and once you have created a life shift for yourself, whatever that looks like, your life is not just full, it's fulfilled. Not only do you get more and better sleep, you wake up feeling rested and happy. You know that you're doing what you need to do. Yes, sometimes your heart will call you to leave certain friends or family members in order to find a more aligned peer group. From what I've seen, however, the ones who leave always return to lead their family and friends to success. Because your friends are more in alignment with your beliefs and value system, they support you while also pushing you toward your personal best. Life still involves work, but as a whole, it feels far more effortless. But you don't have to wait for the right person, right job, or right investment opportunity to show up. You can start living now so that every moment as you go forward through the process of recovering from rock bottom and redesigning your life is one more step to being the best version of you, the one who came back.
And that is what my new book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation, is all about. It is now available on Audible and Amazon Books, as well as wherever fine books are sold. And there is a special if you go to my website, www.sheilamac.com. www.sheilamac.com. So grab a copy today, and in that book you will get 14 free gifts related to strategizing and redesigning life on your terms. Is not one size fits all, just like a pair of boots or a bra. So the formula is designed to help you through any situation. To grab a copy of my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. It is now available on Audible as well as on Amazon and Kindle, and at www.sheilamac.com. Tune in again right here on KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.